I have no real updates for you all at this time. There's so many tapes to go through. However, here's the next tape in line that I wrote down. I'm sorry if some things don't make sense. The quality of the audio wasn't the best, but I tried. Radio show host. Another lovely night of music. And I hope you agree, dear listeners. Sadly, we have to end the program. But we do not need to end it immediately. We do have time for a little story at the end. This story comes from the state where this broadcast is from, Washington State. This one came in the mail only last week. So, we apologize if it seems a bit hasty or if the quality isn't that good. I have a good feeling about this one, listeners. I will stop talking now and introduce The Angry Forest Spirit, narrated by John Sampson. Dog Walker. I am not religious and don't believe in ghosts or anything like that. However, based on what I had experienced, I'm not too sure anymore. I've told this story in multiple forms at this point, but no one seems to believe me. My friends and my family have called me crazy. But if this radio show can get the word out, I can probably get someone to help me. This happened on September 4th, 2001. And today's date, October 8th, 2003. I take my dog out for midnight walks every day. He's a black Labrador pit bull mix, so he is not a small dog by any sense of the imagination. Hell, I'm not the smallest person either. So, I'm not too afraid to take walks out at night. Plus, I live in the suburbs, so it is literally the safest place to take a midnight walk. I'm not stupid. I always take a reflective jacket and a flashlight if it gets too dark. I used to walk my dog in a park where baseball and soccer fields are. There is a relatively small patch of forest right next to the fields. What I mean by relatively small is about 9, maybe 10 houses when going by the sidewalk. I honestly didn't pay attention. It has been a long time since I went there. Right, getting back on topic. It was a full moon. My dog, Clive, and I were taking our usual walk. It was a typical night, and I remembered no cars were out, which I thought was strange, but not too weird. I believe it was midnight, if I remember right. Nothing really happened. I just walked up the sidewalk towards the park. There are 2 paths. One wide path that's been maintained and covered in bark chips. Most people take that path during the day. The other path which is closer, is much narrower. The bushes are less upkept on this path. There are still bark chips, but it feels more like you're on a forest trail. I like to go on hikes, but ever since I got a new job, I haven't been able to go up to the mountains as much as I used to. So this was the closest thing to it. Getting back on track again, we walked down the narrower path, and as soon as we took a step on the ground, it felt like someone was watching us, and they were angry. Clive started to growl at something in the forest. I shined my light at roughly where he was growling. I didn't really see anything besides the green foliage and the shadows that were clinging to them. A bit spooked, I decided to keep the light on for both of our sakes, and we went down the forest trail for the last time. The trail isn't that long. It's like 1, maybe 2 minutes if you're taking your time, which I normally do. A bad decision at the time. We walked down the trail, and the shadows seemed to hang on every plant, tree, and bark chip that I moved my light over. Clive was tense. Throughout our walking, the fur on his back was up. Despite his breed, he looked like he was ready to bite someone's throat. Clive was the sweetest dog you could have. Maybe a bit clumsy, but never aggressive. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I started to pick up my pace, but then I heard a deeper growl behind me and a sharp pain in my back. I do remember some things, but I do not know much about what happened. I do remember what I felt. I felt pain, numbness, fear, bliss, panic, happiness. But then I felt calm. Clive was aggressively barking and whining. I tried moving, but my legs wouldn't move. I wasn't lying on the ground. I was still standing. I felt my arm being tugged on by the leash. The creature was right behind me. I felt its breath on the back of my neck. I saw what I thought was its tail. It looked like it was made out of vines, trees, bark, dead flesh, or some sort of moss. I think I dropped the flashlight when its tail came into view, because where the light fell, I saw a massive figure. He was much larger than me, built like a bodybuilder, and had to be 7 feet tall. He was heavily scarred. I thought I saw his teeth, and they were sharpened. But most strangely, he had a bear pelt on his head. The tail was gone from my vision, and the hot breath was gone from my neck. The huge man shoved me away, and my legs suddenly had the energy to move. Clive took the hint and ran. My head was still foggy, so I didn't know where we were going. I didn't know if we were in the middle of the street or back in the forest, although I could still hear the creature and the man fighting all the while. Strangely enough, I thought I saw a man in a mask with a strange cane. Next thing I knew, I was home because Clive was scratching at the front door. I unlocked it and went inside. I probably fell asleep on the floor because I was laying on my carpet when I woke up. I called the police and told them I've been mugged and stabbed in the back. They came with an ambulance and took my statement. I didn't tell them everything because they would call me crazy if I did. Paramedics looked at my back, and aside from some swelling, it looked like a bee sting. A small one, apparently. They left, and later that day, I wanted to see if I could grab my flashlight. I didn't take Clive because he seemed pretty tired. When I got to the park, nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. But where I thought I was last night, I saw most of the trees knocked down. I took a closer look, and I thought there was blood on the branches. But it looked more like tree sap. It was too brown to be blood, and too red to be sap. I found my flashlight, but it was destroyed. I think one of them stepped on it. I told my parents, then my sisters, and my friend. And now I am here. Let's hope someone can help me. Radio show host. And that was The Angry Forest Spirit. I hope you enjoyed that story, and I do hope to see all of you next week for our broadcast. Stay scared and keep listening to happy music on The Cultist Den. I don't know why I'm writing this all down now. I mean, no one would believe me, and maybe no one will. But no matter how hard I try to rationalize away what happened, I know what I saw. It wasn't the first summer the four of us had spent together at the annual youth camp about an hour from my house. I still remember their carefree faces, smiling, laughing. None of us knew this trip would be our last. As we arrived at the camp, we unloaded our bags from the car and headed towards our cabin. The sun was shining brightly, the birds were chirping, and the air was filled with the sound of our laughter. We settled into our cabin after orientation and looked forward to our activities for the week. We were all excited to be back together again. The first few days were filled with swimming, singing around a campfire, and exploring the nature trails. It was on the fourth night that things started to get strange. We were all sitting around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. That's when we heard the rustling in the bushes. At first, we thought it was just an animal, but then we saw it. "What's that?" Jack asked, pointing behind me. I chuckled. "Hardy hard, dude. I'm not falling for it." "Nah, man, just look," he insisted. I rolled my eyes and slowly looked over my shoulder. A pair of glowing eyes stared back at me from the undergrowth just beyond the firelight. My heart immediately started beating faster as whatever this thing was seemed to blink as it watched us in silence. "Get back, kids! Behind me!" Jim, the lead counselor at camp, stepped forward with some small pots we'd used to cook. As we all scurried to one side, he opened his jacket and started banging the pots together, shouting at our uninvited guest. We all watched breathlessly as the creature let out a blood-curdling screech and stood up on two legs, startled by the sudden movement. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was tall, with matted fur covering its entire body, and sharp claws that glinted in the firelight. Its eyes were piercing and seemed to glow with an otherworldly intensity. As Jim continued to bang the pots, the creature made a sudden move, charging at us with frightening speed. We all screamed and scattered, trying to get as far away from the creature as possible. I stumbled and fell, my ankle twisting painfully under me. I cried out in pain, trying to crawl away from the creature as it seized Jim, tearing into him mercilessly. I buried my head in the dirt, frozen in terror, trying to block out his dying screams, accented by the crunching, squelching sounds of his flesh being consumed live. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then, everything went silent. I opened my eyes slowly, expecting to see the creature standing over me, ready to strike. Instead, sunlight blinded me as soon as I raised my head, and I reflexively closed my eyes again. I squinted and raised my hand to my forehead, searching frantically for any sign of the creature. Not only was there no sign of it, nothing remained of my friends or Jim, save a small slick of blood and viscera on the ground where he'd been killed. I tried to stand, but my ankle gave out on me, and I fell back to the ground. Pain shot through the joint, and a sharp spasm shot up my leg. I closed my eyes and tried to focus, which was difficult since I was still coming down from the shock of what had just happened. I slowly stood up, fighting back a wave of nausea and pain. I stepped over to the mess that had once been the head counselor and gagged. With no idea of where to turn, I limped through the woods, following the winding trail that would eventually lead back towards the main cabins. I was about halfway there when I saw another counselor coming up the trail. I broke down crying, my body racked with sharp spasms as I struggled to catch my breath. Seeing me in turn, Brandon broke into a run until he caught up with me. "Jack! Derek! Oh my God! Where are you?" I cried, nearly delirious. "Jack! Where are you? Tell me you're okay, please." I sobbed, clinging to Brandon's shoulder as he knelt beside me. Hey now. It's okay, I'm here. Everything's going to be alright," he assured me. "What happened to you? Are you hurt?" he asked, looking me over. He saw my ankle and gasped, "Oh, wow. We need to get you to a doctor." The monster." I rambled, done in by pain and exhaustion. Brandon pulled out his cell phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency?" asked the operator on the other end. "I need an ambulance. I have a friend who was attacked by a wild animal." "What kind of animal?" I'm not really sure. It was just some kind of big, fur-covered thing with teeth and claws." "All right. I'm sending someone right away. Where are you?" "I'm at the campground off Highway 18. We're just off the main trail, west of the cabins." "Okay. The ambulance and police will be there as soon as possible. Stay with your friend." Brandon hung up the phone and looked down at me. "The ambulance is on its way. We can't stay here. It's too dangerous. Let's get you back to the cabin so you can have something more comfortable to lie on." He scooped me up and carried me the rest of the way to the cabin. I made it to the hospital eventually, and aside from a sprained ankle, shattered nerves, and some scrapes, I was alright. My friends weren't, though. They were never found. Not a single trace. I explained to everyone who would listen what I'd seen, but it didn't do any good. I was written off as a grief-stricken child whose mind had created what it wanted to see to make sense of my trauma. The camp was deserted immediately, and the police never did find the creature. To make matters worse, when they found Jim's body, The attack was blamed on a mountain lion found in the area. But I didn't buy it. I know what I saw, and it was no cougar. My parents tried to convince me that the trauma from seeing my friends murdered had left me with some kind of delusion. But they don't understand. I'm hoping that if I get this written down, maybe someone will finally believe me. I have to believe that the memory of what I saw that day will stop haunting me someday. My friends, Jose, Luke, and I always search for new things. We invented challenges and explored every inch of our hometown. Not long ago, we discovered geocaching. The three of us downloaded this app on our phones and set out. Filling our backpack with miscellaneous junk to replace any treasures we found, we rode out on our bikes. We didn't find too much. A panda pencil hugger and a $2 bill were among our top finds. Soon, the app led us off the beaten path. In between our neighborhood and the next, there's a dead-end road that leads to a power plant surrounded by the woods. Through said woods, a dirt path lined by massive power lines. Should we be worried about, electrocution? I say as we pull up to the spot.
Nah, we're fine,
said Jose. We search and search. This geocache is nowhere to be found. I mean, we've scoured everywhere, except for the more dangerous spots.
Bro, it's not here. Somebody already got it,
said Luke.
Yeah, they must have forgotten to replace it,
Jose says. We call it quits, walking back up towards the road. The following day, our trio is hanging out as usual. Luke's little brother, Gary, comes to join us. This is unusual, because he's, a hermit. I don't believe he'd seen the sun last summer. This kid plays computer games from dusk till dawn. We tell him of yesterday's geocaching experience, and he wants to try it himself. We agree. We're still curious and excited. Gary rides on Luke's handlebars because he's small enough. We make it to the dead end. He's having a blast.
Hey, we didn't try searching the woods yet,
Jose says. On second thought, not a great idea. Our tire most certainly does not suit a venture into the woods. Thorns, bugs, more thorns. It's awful. We were wanting to give up, but something stops us. A lone white shed.
Whoa, what the heck? Why's that out here?
Jose says. Maybe it's for hunting deer or something? I say.
Here? By the power plant? We're not even that deep into the woods.
Luke points out.
Good point. That is odd,
I say.
Want to go see it?
Jose says, motioning in its direction.
No way, dude.
Luke says.
Are you crazy?
Let's go, I say, pointing towards the out-of-place building. Busted windows and black graffiti. Expecting the usual vulgar phrases and dick drawings, it's safe to say we were caught by surprise. Sure, it was graffiti all right, but it was different. One phrase.
What is this?
Jose blurted out. Follow the power, it read. The words were not too legible. A can of rusted black spray paint lay on the ground.
Maybe it leads to the geocache?
Jose said. You can't be serious, I replied. He shrugged. We looked at each other. This went on for minutes. We pondered what to do. Curiosity got the better of us. Outside of the gravel of the power plant, in between the woods, lay a vast trail lined by massive power lines. Hesitantly, we followed the trail. It stretched on forever. An endless plain running through the vast woods. I'm not sure how long we walked. Maybe hours. The sun was now beginning to set, and our parents were worried. All of us received non-stop calls and texts from them. We eventually silenced our phones. The trail stopped, and the woods began again, seemingly another dead end. Should we keep going? I asked.
Well, we followed the power lines, but I see nothing,
Jose said. I can't believe we're doing this. What are we going to tell our parents? I said.
I don't know, man. We made it this far. We might as well keep going,
Luke said. I nodded, and we stepped into the woods. It was dead quiet, only broken up by the crunching of leaves and snapping of twigs beneath our feet. We trudged onward, trying our best to be quiet. We didn't know what we'd find, much less what we were looking for. Curiosity is a powerful thing. We had grown uneasy, beginning to smell an indescribable stench. Something felt wrong. My stomach churned. Then we reached a clearing. We froze, for before us stood an inexplicable sight. A group standing in the clearing, adorned in coats made of dark brown fur. Their attire was the least of my concerns. Those faces, I can still picture them clearly. They were missing their eyes and mouths, yet they still had noses. It was as if God forgot to add those features when creating them.
What the fuck?
Jose whispered to me.
The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and my heart rate increased. We were not supposed to be here. Everything in me wanted to run, but I was petrified. I just stared ahead. Could they see me? I shuddered. And what were they doing here? Something else came out of the woods. A wolf or coyote. Only it was standing on its hind legs. In its grasp, a crude knife. It was something straight out of an archaeological dig. I'd seen nothing similar. Again, my fight or flight response was leaning towards flight. But my body just did not respond. None of us said a word to one another. A lump formed in my throat. I anxiously expected what was going to happen. I could not look away. One by one, the wolf walked up to the faceless people and began carving. It took its knife and carved into their faces. Soon, what felt like an eternity later, each of the beings now had a face. Beady eyes and crooked mouths. They were even more terrifying than before. The wolf then strolled back into the woods, while those things just stood there. By now, I had seen enough. The others must have had the same thought. My curiosity left and was replaced by survival. Slowly, we tiptoed backwards through the woods, clenching our teeth, hoping they couldn't hear us. I think they're looking at us, Jose whispered through chattering teeth. A shiver went over my whole body. He was right. I could feel those black eyes staring right at us. Go, go! I say in a scream whisper. We haul ass without looking back, disregarding the many thorns grabbing us. Just as we're exiting the woods into the power plant, a loud mechanical noise cuts through the trees. Its roar shakes us to our core. Luke even throws Gary onto his shoulders, grabbing our bikes as fast as possible. Slamming those kickstands, we pedal back to civilization. Those things chased us the entire way, stopping only as we exited the power plant. We walk with our bikes along the road, relieved that we escaped and no longer have anyone following us. The dim street lights illuminate our way. We take our phones off silent, bombarded with missed calls and texts from our family. Oh God, they must be so worried, I say. We then hear a siren coming from a police car. The red and blue lights come zooming around the corner. Our parents must have called the police. I guess we better go talk to them, Jose says. As we approach the vehicle, I felt everything will be alright. That is, until I see the officer. Similar to those forest creatures, he lacks eyes and a mouth. We run again, but the cop remains still. My friends and I make it home to our parents' relief. We're, of course, grounded for at least the next month. Later that night, I lay in bed, my eyes wide open. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake that feeling. I kept trying to reassure myself. They couldn't leave the woods, right? I mean, they stopped following us. So as long as we didn't go back to the power plant, we'll be fine. Why did they stop chasing us? But what about the cop? I text Luke and Jose, checking if they're okay, and relaying my thoughts to them, hoping they have more answers than I. No response from either. I hear chiming dings of text tones. It's coming from outside my window. I peel back the blinds, peeking through them, my hands shaking. My friends on the other side stare, their eyes beady and animalistic, smiles jagged. I fear I soon will meet a similar fate. I've always been drawn to the cold, to the kind of isolation only the dead of winter can offer. There's something about the snow-blanketed silence that settles over the world that feels sacred. So, when I got the chance to stay in a remote cabin in northern Minnesota for a week, I jumped at it. The cabin belonged to a friend of my uncle's, a retired logger named Red. He was the kind of man who wore flannel like a second skin and could whittle a masterpiece out of a branch without breaking a sweat. Red gave me the key, warned me to keep the fire stoked, and offhandedly mentioned, "Watch yourself out there. These woods have a way of changing a man." I laughed it off. Everyone likes to make the wilderness sound more mysterious than it is. The first 3 days were perfect. I'd wake up to the glow of the sun filtering through the frost-coated windows, spend the day hiking the trails, and return to the warmth of the cabin by evening. The woods were alive with the sounds of nature, snow crunching beneath my boots, the distant howl of coyotes, the occasional rustle of something moving just out of sight. It wasn't until the fourth night that I noticed the silence. It crept in gradually. No birdsong in the morning, no distant howls at night. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the occasional creak of the cabin settling in the cold. I chalked it up to the weather, but by the 5th day, unease had settled in my chest like a stone. The trails I'd grown familiar with seemed different. Trees gnarled and twisted in ways I didn't remember. Paths that seemed to double back on themselves, leading me in circles. The air carried a strange scent, metallic and sharp, like rusted iron. It clung to me, making my nose sting and my stomach churn. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the nagging feeling that I wasn't alone wouldn't let me shake it. That evening, I decided to stay close to the cabin. As the sun set, the world outside the frosted windows seemed darker than it should have been. The firelight flickered weakly, casting long, flickering shadows that danced across the walls. Around midnight, I heard the first sound, a distant, bone-deep crack, like a tree snapping in half. The noise made me jump, and I sat bolt upright, straining to listen. The wind had picked up, howling around the cabin. But there was something else, something buried beneath it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I ventured outside, hoping the light of day would chase away the unease that had gripped me. Instead, I found tracks in the snow. They weren't human, but they weren't quite animal either. Long, narrow impressions of clawed toes that dug deep into the frozen ground. The tracks circled the cabin. I told myself it was just a bear, a big one, maybe starving from hibernation. But the claw marks etched into the cabin's wooden door suggested something else entirely. They were too precise, too deliberate, as if whatever had made them wasn't just scratching. It was testing, searching. I spent the rest of the day barricading the door and windows, piling furniture against the walls, and keeping the fire roaring. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that nothing would happen. But by the time night fell, I was shaking. And then the screams started. They didn't sound human, high-pitched and wailing, the kind of sound that makes your teeth ache and your skin crawl. They came from deep in the woods, at first faint and distant, but growing louder, closer. I could feel it more than hear it, a thrumming vibration in the walls, in my chest. The fire crackled weakly, its light dimming as the shadows pressed in closer. Then came the scratching. It started at the front door, slow, deliberate, a soft scrape of claws against wood. My breath caught, and I pressed my back against the far wall, clutching the fireplace poker like it was some kind of talisman. The scratching moved, circling the cabin, growing louder as it dragged across the walls and windows. I saw it then, or at least I thought I did. A flash of movement in the dark. A tall, gaunt silhouette with limbs too long and joints that bent the wrong way. Its eyes glinted faintly, reflecting the dying firelight. And its teeth, God, its teeth were the color of old bone, jagged and yellowed. I froze. It stopped. Then it spoke. Hungry. It rasped, the word dragging out in an almost whimpering growl. I don't remember deciding to run, but I remember the panic, the surge of adrenaline that pushed me to fling the door open and sprint into the woods. The cold hit me like a wall, but I barely noticed. Behind me, the door slammed shut, the creature's guttural screech splitting the night. I ran blindly, snow crunching beneath my boots, branches clawing at my face and arms. The woods seemed endless, the trees twisting and warping as though alive, their shadows writhing like serpents in the moonlight. The thing followed, its movements erratic and jerky, the sound of its pursuit a cacophony of snapping branches and guttural snarls. I could feel its presence behind me, a suffocating weight that pressed against my back, driving me forward. I don't know how long I ran before I tripped, my foot catching on a root hidden beneath the snow. I hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from my lungs. When I looked up, it was there. It stood at the edge of the clearing, its emaciated frame towering over me. Its eyes burned with a dull, sickly light. and its mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. It reached for me, its claws outstretched, and I swear I felt the cold radiating from its body. An unnatural, bone-deep chill that sapped the strength from my limbs. In that moment, I thought I was going to die. Desperation does strange things to a person. My hand closed around a jagged rock, and I hurled it with all the strength I could muster. The rock struck the creature's head with a sickening crack, and it recoiled, letting out a blood-curdling screech that made my vision blur. I didn't wait to see if it would recover. I scrambled to my feet and ran, my legs burning, my lungs seizing with every ragged breath. Somehow, I found my way back to the cabin. The creature didn't follow, or if it did, it stayed just out of sight, its presence lingering like a shadow at the edge of my vision. I barricaded myself inside and waited, clutching the fireplace poker like a lifeline. The dawn came slowly, the first rays of light cutting through the gloom and chasing away the lingering shadows. I stepped outside, half expecting to see it waiting for me. But the woods were silent again. Too silent. I left the cabin that morning, hiking back to the nearest road and flagging down a passing car. I didn't look back. For weeks after, I tried to convince myself it wasn't real. That the isolation, the cold, had made me imagine it all. But the scratches on the door, the tracks in the snow, and the lingering metallic scent on my clothes told a different story. I don't go into the woods anymore, not alone. But every now and then, when the nights grow long and the wind howls through the trees, I think about that thing, about the way it looked at me, not just with hunger, but with recognition. I've started dreaming about it too. The clearing, the screeches, the feeling of cold claws brushing against my skin. And every time I wake up, I feel that same pull I did back then. A whisper in the back of my mind telling me to go back, because something about it feels unfinished. And the hunger, it wasn't just its hunger, it's mine now too. I'm homeless and living out of my car. But not for the reasons you'd think. You see, I'm what you would call a stereotypical mama's boy. Never had any girlfriends, not many friends either. I was an only child who spent all my time clinging to my mother. I didn't have a dad, but my mom made up for it. When she wasn't working, she spent all of her time with me, taking me to the movies, playing video games together. She was my entire world, the only person I needed. Unfortunately for me, this piece would all come crashing down. In my early 20s, my mom started getting sick. I tried so hard to take care of her and prayed every single day. But things only got worse, and the cancer would quickly take her life. Now without hope and all alone, I spiraled into a deep depression. House notes, bills, it all rested on my shoulders now. It was safe to say that I was a deer in the headlights. I had no social skills and no relatives who were willing to help. Before I knew it, I was living in a house with no lights or running water. I was in the worst situation of my life and ended up in a dark place. To keep from falling into drugs or something even worse, I had to leave. One day I packed up my car and didn't look back. I drove for what seemed like forever, seeing more of the world than I ever had before. I met all sorts of people during my travels. Some freaks, but others pretty cool. Literally everything was a new experience for someone who had been sheltered all of his life. But oddly enough, I didn't feel afraid at all. I did miss my dear mother, but there was a feeling of freedom with this new life. Until one day something happened that forced me to consider finding a more traditional home. The story I'm about to share is one that most probably won't believe, but I know what happened, and it will stick with me for the rest of my days. It all started around midnight on a lonely country road. There was nothing but cow fields and old barns as far as the eye could see. I was trying to make it to the next town before calling it a night. But I had been driving all day and was getting pretty tired. Seeing as how I didn't want to wreck my only home, I decided it was time to pull over. I parked on the outskirts of one of the large cow fields. It was a clear night with stars filling the sky, so I figured it would be nice to break out my tarp and enjoy the view. After setting up, I sat down and opened up a bag of chips. In moments like this, I always found myself thinking of my mother. I missed the times we shared together, which is why I had to leave. I didn't really know what life had in store, but there was no going back. I couldn't stomach having to live alone in that empty house. Over time, my eyes started to get heavy. I turned on my side, ready to get some shut-eye, hoping an angry farmer wouldn't greet me with a shotgun the next morning. As I did, the most peculiar thing happened. What seemed like a ball of fire or some sort of meteor whizzed by. Thinking it was a shooting star, I paid it no mind. I would attempt to nod off, but that proved impossible, as the nearby woods gave off an ominous orange glow. My first thought was that this could be a forest fire, but as I rose to my feet, a loud whirring sound filled the air, to the point that I started having strong headaches. I limped back to my car, writhing in pain, prepared to call for help. While trying to dig for my phone, I heard a strange thud from behind me, sort of like footsteps from a very large person. I turned to see whom or what was behind me. That's when I saw it. A giant creature about 7 or 8 feet tall in stature crept towards me. It seemed to be in some sort of metallic suit, giving off the same glow from before. The being wore an astronaut-like helmet that hid its facial features. It tried reaching for me with a slender and wrinkled arm. I instantly screamed and locked myself inside my car. Tears started to swell as I feared for my life. Never before had I seen something so horrifying. It was obvious this being was not of our world. I grabbed a knife from my glove box and clutched it tightly. Not that it could stand up to a literal freaking monster. The next thing I knew, its bony 3-fingered hand was pressed against my window. I was certain that the being would have no trouble shattering the glass. Quickly, I crawled onto the back floorboard and started to pray. I just lost my mother a few months ago, and now a monster was trying to kill me. What did it want? And was my life seriously about to end here? All these things swirled through my mind until I heard a voice. One that came from within my own head, speaking in a very kind tone.
Do not fear, human, for I've come to you with an offer. Come with us and learn all there is. See sights that no other human could fathom. When you return, eternal knowledge will belong to you and you alone.
I understood the words clearly, but my fear overpowered everything else. Before giving the offer any thought, I yelled to the top of my lungs. No, just leave me alone. Go away. Following my outburst, everything went silent. Save for my nervous breathing, I tried so desperately to hide. It seemed like an eternity had passed, and I didn't hear anything. So, reluctantly, I peered from the window to check my surroundings. I was relieved to see that this horrifying entity was no longer there. I glanced to my left, then the right. It was really gone. Naturally, I rushed into my front seat and started the engine. Before pulling off, I saw a large glowing object rise up from the trees. It was cigar-shaped and gave off the same loud humming sound from earlier. Even though I was terrified, I found myself transfixed by this once-in-a-lifetime moment. Before I knew it, the craft shot up into the air faster than I could blink. Afterwards, I peeled out of the field and kept driving until I found civilization. This was truly a harrowing experience for me. One that truly changed my outlook. Never had I believed in supernatural or aliens, but my experience was all too real. I ended up keeping this story to myself for the longest. After all, a homeless guy who saw an alien probably wouldn't sound good. I ended up finding myself a job and an apartment, no longer interested in the nomadic lifestyle. Presently, I've even started dating a beautiful waitress. Even though my life is pretty normal, I still have strange moments. Every once in a while, whenever I'm alone, I feel as if I can still hear the creature calling out to me, telling me that they're still watching and haven't forgotten me. But for the sake of normalcy, I try to ignore it. I often wonder what would have happened if I went with them. Was it a trap to hurt me? Or would they have really shown me all these amazing things? I guess it doesn't matter now, but I'll never forget my close encounter on that dreary farmstead.